Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host, Phil Lindsey. From the Star Wars universe comes one of the most iconic villains of all time, with a menacing presence, an icy demeanor, and a ruthless swagger that made him the most dangerous and vile Sith Lord to ever exist, while also capturing the imaginations of sci-fi fans for generations to come. We're talking about Darth Vader. Darth Vader debuted in George Lucas's Star Wars, later known as Episode 4 A New Hope, which was released on May 25, 1977. Vader was the primary antagonist of the film, which focused on the battle between the heroic Rebel Alliance and Vader's evil galactic empire. Darth Vader's name was based on the phrase Dark Water, with Lucas lifting some words from the German-Dutch language. The end result, Darth Vader, was thus loosely interpreted as Dark Father. Vader's iconic look was developed by legendary concept artist Ralph McQuarrie, based on descriptions from Lucas, with McQuarrie incorporating samurai themes into the design. The task of bringing those designs to life fell to costume designer John Mallow and prop sculptor Brian Muir, who actually built Vader's helmet and armor. Ben Burtt is credited with creating the sound of Vader's respirator, which came from recordings of a breathing apparatus used in scuba diving. Darth Vader was brought to life in the original Star Wars trilogy by British bodybuilder turned actor David Prowse. Prowse was initially told he would be voicing the character, but the decision was ultimately made to record another actor's voice for the role. Famed actor-director Orson Welles was considered for the part, but eventually went to actor James Earl Jones. Thanks to Prowse's imposing figure and Jones's demonic bass voice, Darth Vader immediately became a major focus of the Star Wars trilogy. Darth Vader's backstory was developed throughout the original trilogy, where it was revealed that he was once a Jedi named Anakin Skywalker. Anakin was the father of Star Wars' primary protagonist, Luke Skywalker, and twin sister Princess Leia Organa. Vader ultimately met his demise and found redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi. Anakin's backstory was fully realized in the next Star Wars trilogy. Anakin was portrayed by Hayden Christensen in a story which focused on his childhood, his rise as the Jedi apprentice, and his eventual turn to the dark side. More of his adventures were also detailed in the Clone Wars animated series. Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader at the end of Revenge of the Sith. Darth Vader's story continued in animation as well, and he was also included in 2016's Rogue One, the prequel to Episode 4. Vader has also appeared in video games, novels, and comic book adaptations. It was announced in December of 2020 that a brand new Obi-Wan Kenobi live-action series is coming to the Disney Plus streaming service, with Christensen returning as Darth Vader. Darth Vader remains one of the most popular characters in movie cinema history. His impact in the Star Wars universe, as well as pop culture in general, cannot be overstated, and for fans all around the world, he is an intriguing and captivating character whose struggles with good and evil continue to be a timeless tale for audiences to this day. And that's the lowdown on Darth Vader. I am an OT guy. That is to say, I am an original trilogy guy. It's partly my age, because I grew up with the original trilogy. It's partly due to the fact that I love the original trilogy. I think they're the best three movies by far. Of course, I'm going to feel that way because, number one, I believe it's true, but number two, I believe that, yes, everyone's going to have a soft spot in their heart for what they grew up with. It just means more to you than something that comes along later. And I tried not to go into the second trilogy with preconceived notions, but I don't know if anybody was able to do that, at least not at the beginning. Some people were more accepting of those films than I was. I'm still a critic. I can't help myself. I've not been as harsh on the last trilogy. It has its flaws. That's very true. And one day, hopefully, we'll touch on those three movies and talk about those. But I think one of the biggest keys to making the Star Wars universe work as a whole is the fact that these characters are so completely iconic. There's no other word for it, man. It's heroes and villains and these legendary characters. And different archetypes that are shown throughout the series now that's on Disney and with the Mandalorian and the different movies and the cartoons, animated series, and all this other stuff. I mean, all of that combined, just shows you that with enough time and with enough storytelling, with enough great characterization, these characters can stand the test of time and live forever. And when you talk about that, I think you're talking about Darth Vader. Vader for me, and everyone's got a list in their head, right? I know I have. I'm sure you do, Phil. Everyone's got one. Especially if you're a fanboy or a fangirl. Your greatest list of villains of all time. So for me, Vader's it. But he's not the greatest because he is the most vile, reprehensible. I don't see. That's not the Vader I grew up with. The Vader that we saw later in the original trilogy, and we'll get to that guy. You see his turn. You see the terrible thing he does at the end to finally become Vader. Just the cold-blooded murder. I mean, my God, it's awful. But like the Vader I grew up with was this old dude who'd been Vader for a long time, who found redemption in the end of the third movie, which, now he's a good guy. He's babyface now, right? So that's the Vader I knew. So yes, he's on my list. Yes, he's probably number one, but no, he's not number one because he's Hannibal Lecter. He's not, in my opinion. When it comes to the greatest villains of all time, and you don't have to give me your list, Phil, but where does Vader rank for you? Is he number one, top 5, I assume? Where is he for you?
He's right up there for me. I'm a big Doctor Doom guy. He's one of my favorite villains. But he's right up there with like that Doom, like Thanos, anybody else you want to name in pop culture at the moment.
I love the Thanos pitch there. That's good because there's no. I think one of the things about villains, if I can back up for a second, I think one of the things that's compelling about villains, especially Marvel villains, is that just when you want to hate the Marvel villain, they give you a reason to cheer for them. They give you a reason to be sympathetic for them. They give you a reason to say, oh, crap, now I identify with this guy. I didn't see that coming. And I never identified with Thanos, this guy. When they call him the Mad Titan, you're 100% right. He's the Mad Titan. So that's a great pick for a great villain. And so maybe he should be number one on my list. But Vader, first of all, we got to talk about his appearance, man, because that outfit, that suit, I mean, I don't know if there's ever been a cooler looking villain. Thanos looks pretty cool. But this is a fully functioning, live and in person, practical effects, practical costuming. I mean, even when I go to comic book conventions and I see a guy who's the right height, who's dressed as Vader, it's still, he's right there. And I'm like, it's just a dude in a Vader suit, right? But it doesn't matter because he looks awesome. Like, there's just something about that. I mean, talk about, how he looks, man. Just that ominous presence. Like, if you didn't know this guy was a villain, you'd know by looking at him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, he's tall, he's imposing. I mean, just the all black and, of course, the breathing. Just everything about him just is like just iconic villain. Everything you see about him, his presentation. I mean, before he even says a word, before he moves, it's just like his profile, his silhouette when he walks in a room. It's just amazing.
And that breathing, like you said, and I'm trying to remember back to the backstage stuff on that, where they had took a microphone and put it inside of a scuba tank, like with the oxygen. Isn't that what they did to get that sound?
I never knew that.
Yeah, I think that they took a mic and they put it inside of a I want to say air tank, but that doesn't sound right. Like a scuba tank, like a diving tank, to get that sound. That's why it sounds so hollow and it's got that almost mechanical sound to it. But everybody's got a Dusty Rhodes impression. I think everybody's got a Darth Vader impression too. It's just, can't help it. Everyone can do the sound or at least try to mimic it. So there's so many things iconic about this guy, the suit, the helmet. And I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but it's kind of what we do, right? When they took that helmet off in Jedi, I was stunned. Because you knew that was the last movie. Because you're like, well, this is it. It's over. Because we're going to see what Darth Vader looks like. Like, he had the helmet off previously, but his back was to you. You just knew that the back of his head was just all kinds of screwed up. So you knew he was probably scarred beyond belief. And then you saw him without the mask. Like, what a shocking thing, man, to see him like, okay, this is this big, like you said, ominous, imposing guy, and now he's just a human dude. He's just an old man, Luke's father. I mean, what is it about this character, man, that all these years later we're still talking about him? Not just the fact that they've kind of rebooted the universe and continued the universe. If they had left the universe alone, we'd still be talking about Vader. I mean, why do you think that is?
What I think visually he's just so interesting. But I think if you just leave it on New Hope and you just see him as this visually impressive character, and you don't add the stuff like his connection to Luke later in the next two movies, and then his backstory in the original, the prequels rather, like all of those things make him even more interesting.
Yeah, they do, and they just add layer upon layer upon layer to his character. And, you know, he really did evolve through the original trilogy. I mean, the first time we saw him in episode 4, it kind of felt like he was more politician, more of a, I don't know, like a structure. He was, instead of being like a dastardly villain, instead of being the mustache twirling guy wearing the black hat, he felt more like, well, this is my job. I got to help run the Empire. This is my deal. And we had heard I can't remember if they mentioned the Emperor in episode 4, maybe, but you kind of felt like Vader was the guy in charge. But an interesting dynamic in that film, because I want to get straight to this, the relationship between him and Grand Moff Tarkin. Tarkin seemed to be the only guy who could really keep Vader in his place. Not in his place, but he was the only guy Vader would listen to, because Vader's force choking this guy, and Tarkin's like, enough of this, Vader, release him. And Vader goes, as you wish. And I'm like, wow, that worked? That's crazy. Like, you couldn't do that with Kylo Ren. It'd kill you. You know what I mean? So it's funny how in that movie that the relationship between him and Tarkin, it kind of felt like they were on the same level. Did it feel that way to you?
Sort of. I almost felt like it was kind of like, well, before we know anything about Palpatine, it's kind of like, oh, well, Tarkin's here to keep him in line. And maybe I always assumed, like, when I first saw it, maybe Tarkin has something on him, and I never knew what I thought of it, but it was almost like Tarkin's like, yep, I got you. You do what I tell you to do. And it's kind of like, whatever, I'll do it.
Yeah, and it's when he's questioned by the other guys around him, his not his admirals, but his colonels or whatever it is, whatever their rank was at the time. And, you know, the one guy speaks up, you know, and he's like, you don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your ancient devotion to that what is it? Your ancient, I used to know this stuff by heart. Your ancient devotion to that mystical religion doesn't help you conjure up the stolen data tapes. That's something to that effect. And I'm sitting there going, you do know this is Darth Vader. Like, I'm no fool. I'm a kid when I first saw episode 4, but I'm kind of thinking that's probably a bad move. Like, politicians, man, not always the smartest guys in the room, as obviously you can see. And so it's funny, man, because we saw with the next trilogy, again, the idea of politics in Star Wars. Queen Amidala, really, it was politics. These are politics. I'm like, what? This is the military. This is the Nazis. This is the Nazi regime. He's Hitler. That's what this is. That's what it felt like to me. That was obviously what George Lucas was going for. I mean, I don't think it's, and I actually covered this because we had done all 3 episodes of the original trilogy. I don't think it's any accident that the stormtroopers were all wearing white armor. Yeah. Not that was Lucas being like that, but I think that was a statement. These are Nazis. This is about power. You never saw women in the Empire. I still don't think you should, if I can complain about it for a second. Because Lucas's point was, I don't want to introduce anything soft into this. It needs to be rigid, no love, no emotion, no possibility of anything that looks sweet at all. No women in the Empire. I kind of see where he's going with that, man. You know what I mean?
I mean, if you don't get the iconography right away, you definitely see it in the new trilogy. Because I
Yes.
mean, like a lot of those first few scenes in Force Awakens is just like clear Nazi iconography.
And what's the guy? Hux.
Hux, yes.
We stand here, and he's all proper, and the banners are on either side of him, and you're like, wow, just hit me over the head with it, why don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I got what they were going for, and they're called stormtroopers for crying out loud. We know what they're going for. So yeah, I mean, at the time we didn't know any better because we didn't have Empire, we didn't have Jedi, we didn't know about the Emperor yet. Vader was the big bad. He was clearly the villain of the piece. He was the guy they were all scared to death of. And then, like I said, you've got his lieutenant sitting there mouthing off to him, which never made any sense to me. But the evolution of this guy through the three films is fascinating to me because we hear about his past. And then you get more details from Ben Kenobi, who tells Luke, and we didn't know Luke was Vader's son at this point, kids, don't forget that he, a young apprentice of mine named Darth Vader, who was a pupil, what does he say? Who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil, betrayed and murdered your father. So now we got even more of a reason to hate Vader. I know when you saw episode 4, you'd probably already seen everything else before you saw episode 4, didn't you?
I'm trying to remember because I always remember when I actually saw Star Wars for the first time. I don't think I saw it in order.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say I saw Jedi before I saw New Hope.
Oh, wow.
Um, I'm pretty sure I did. And of course, I eventually went back and watched them all in their correct order. But I think when I initially saw them, I saw Return of the Jedi first.
Another co-host on the show, Mick Ramsey, he saw Empire first. So he had to go back. And just one movie off was a shock for him in terms of, wait a minute, this looks older. They look younger. What's happening? So he, as a kid, he's having to get his bearings and figure out what's going on. And so it's kind of weird. But I can't imagine going from Jedi back to episode 4. That must have been sort of an adjustment period. You know what I mean? Because you got Vader in his final shot. Like the last time we see Vader, I mean, at the end of his life, that's it. I mean, we get Vader later, but it's not the Vader that in the original timeline. He's dead, right? So
right.
Then you went back and saw his origins. Speaking of origins, and I don't want to jump back to the original or to the second trilogy too soon. I had heard for years that after Jedi that there was a fourth movie in the works, that they were going to tell the story of Anakin's life as a kid, as a young man, how he's seduced by the dark side of the Force, as Ben Kenobi said. And I'd always heard and read that it was going to be a female Sith that lured him to the dark side of the Force. Yeah.
Interesting.
It was going to be like a weird, natural born killers thing, I guess. I don't know. Sid and Nancy, I guess, you know what I mean? Where it's, two crazy, wacky kids that shouldn't be together, and one of them's a stone cold Sith. and she lures him to the dark side, Adam and Eve kind of thing, I guess. I don't know. But as we know, that didn't come to be, which I think would have been a much more interesting story. But that's just me talking. By Empire Strikes Back, first of all, we got to say Han took care of him at the end of episode 4. I mean, had Han not showed up to help Luke, you can make the argument that Luke doesn't destroy the Death Star. I mean, because Vader had him on target, had him locked in. And Vader supposedly didn't know that Luke was his son, just like none of us knew at that time.
Right.
But yeah, had Han not showed up, Vader would have blown the whole thing up, or blown Luke up, and that would have been the end of it. But it's funny, man, because the lightsaber duel in episode 4 with him and Ben, we didn't know how cool lightsaber duels could be because this was all we had, was just two old dudes fighting. But we got to give David Prowse props, who passed away, unfortunately. David Prowse was in the suit for the original trilogy. He was a British bodybuilder turned actor in phenomenal shape. And trivia that I didn't know, I just learned this the other day actually, he actually trained Christopher Reeve. he helped him get in shape for the first Superman film.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they contacted him and said Chris needs muscle. He was a scrawny kid actor, so he put on 40 pounds of muscle, and he looks phenomenal in that suit. For it to be just pull on spandex, man, he fills that thing out, you know. But yeah, Prowse was a bodybuilder, but man, they got the right guy. I mean, despite the fact you don't hear his voice and all that stuff, he had the mannerisms down. It seemed like he knew when to move. He knew what his cues were. I mean, looking back on it, I don't know if they could have got anybody better. It seems like an easy task, just put on a suit and walk around and stand on that spot. But there had to have been more to it than that. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, you got James Earl to do the voice. I mean, not James Earl, James Earl Jones to do the voice. And it's just, man, I mean, he already looks so imposing, but his voice is just so perfect for a villain. Like, it's so perfect. It's just so deep, and it's like, man, it's just like, I couldn't imagine Vader sounding like anything else.
You know, they got that footage before they had dubbed in the voice. And it's Prowse, because Prowse was British. Prowse is speaking the lines of the film.
I've never seen that.
Oh, it's great. It's great. And it's muffled because he's wearing the mask. He's not mic'd. And he learned all the dialogue because they wanted, they needed the actors to have something to play off of, obviously. So he learned all the dialogue, and it's very funny to go back and watch that. I mean, James Earl Jones, you're right. He's phenomenal. And there's no one else could have done this, of course, for sure. But at the same time, a lot of these guys in the Empire were British. So had they not found James Earl Jones and done Prowse sent him into a recording studio, recorded his voice, amplified it, you know, mixed it just a bit, it probably would have been fine. We wouldn't have known the difference, right? So he actually, I saw him at a comic book convention where he had a slideshow, and he said that the plan was he was going to be the voice of Vader. And they told him that, you know, you learn the dialogue, you speak the lines during the movie. When the movie's wrapped, when you're wrapped with your part, we're going to put you in a recording studio. We're going to let you record the lines, and we're going to overdub them. Well, he never got the call. And he was, after episode 4, he's moving on with his life. He was doing other things. And he's like, I kind of forgot about it. And the next thing you know, they're releasing the movie. And he's like, wait a minute. What happened? So it's crazy, man. Look up there and you know it's you in the suit, but it's not you talking. But it's different, right? But you're right, man. James Earl Jones was great, dude. I don't know who could have done that any better. I mean, it's just iconic. What do you think about Vader from episode 4 to episode 5? What to you? What are the biggest differences? Are there any? I mean, what do you see as being the biggest differences between that character and this first and second movie there?
Well, the second movie, we get a little bit more of his character. We see a little bit more of his I almost want to say vulnerability in the second movie, because that's the first time we see him outside the helmet, even though it's from the back. And then, like, I mean, even just like the way he interacts with all of the characters, the way he interacts with Luke, of course, at the end, it's so different and compared to like just this cold, basically killer in the first episode, because he just kills Obi-Wan in the first episode, and it's like, oh well. This is what we're up against. And then, you know, we get him in the TIE fighter at the end. And it's just like, you just kind of see him as just like, nope, he's just like strictly business kind of. So I think that's kind of the big difference. And then also, I think we get to see why he's so menacing in that one too, because we see him just like batting off laser fire with his hands.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because we get more of the guy I talked about before, the mustache twirling villain in Empire, because he shows up at Bespin in Cloud City, threatens Lando, and it's like, you know, just basically says, well, you're going to turn over your best friend, I'm going to take his place over, you know, and makes it clear that, we're not leaving. You kidding me? We run this joint now. So it's, does everything he has to do to get revenge on Han for screwing up at the end of episode 4, man. So I agree with you. I see the vulnerability there. We really get it in Jedi. We really get it then, right? It comes full circle. And you kind of see what's going on in this guy's head. But you get the great fight scene between him and Luke in Empire, which is, again, it can't compare to Darth Maul versus Obi-Wan. It's much more dynamic. There's flips, there's natural stunt work happening, and there's, that kind of stuff, big green screen and all this other stuff going on. But this was more practical, of course, obviously, but it was still great. And the way he's kicking Luke's butt, man, without even breaking a sweat. Luke is exhausted. It's so much fun stuff to see him at that end spot where he's hanging on and Vader's cut his hand off. His uniform is soaked in sweat. He's soaked. He's dirty. He's beat up. Vader's fine. He's not even sweating it. You know what I mean? Because he just took this kid to school, man. That was the first time we really got to see the whole Force thing at work with this guy. And you see how he was just a master manipulator of it. He could control this thing and make it do what he wants it to do. I mean, he solidified himself as a big bad in that movie. So I'm curious, and I don't know how young you were when you first saw Empire. When I first watched it, well, all right, so if you watched them out of order, then you already knew the truth. When I watched them in order, and at the end of Empire, I remember leaving that theater saying, nope, not true, he's lying to him. It's all a lie. It's a big fat lie. Because I'm a kid, and I'm like, nope, no way, no chance, he's lying to him. And that was me in heavy denial. What do you think about that plot twist, man? We're all used to it now, and it's become the crux of Star Wars universe, right? Is that massive plot twist. But if you can step back from it, what do you think about that as a storytelling device in between these movies here?
Yeah, it has to be one of the greatest plot twists in cinema history. Like, it just came out of nowhere. And I mean, I would say, if anything, when I saw it, because you already know the twist at that point when I saw it, but just like you said, just how he completely just annihilated Luke always catches me off guard when I've watched it, because he just gets beaten so handedly, and then it's just kind of like, by the way, everything Obi-Wan told you is a lie.
Right.
And that's how we end the movie. It's great. It's crazy. It's almost like Infinity War before there was Infinity War. I won't say it was like as big of a defeat because Luke was still alive, but it was still like, no, we basically lost. Like, Luke got beaten really bad. Han is in carbonite.
Right.
We lost.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's why that film is compared to Empire so often. It's just, what's the line from Clerks? It's like, which movie had a better ending, Jedi or Empire? And Dante says Empire, because life is a series of bad endings. It's a series of bleak endings. That's why Empire is so great, because it's life. Because things never end on a good note. I'm like, he's got a point. You know what I mean? But yeah, man, I look at Empire and I look at what happened, and some great backstage stories that have come out about these movies over the years. Just fantastic stuff. The line that supposedly David Prowse says to Mark Hamill is, because Mark Hamill says, he told me enough. He told me you killed him. The line that Prowse spoke to him was, no, Ben killed your father. And that's what everybody thought was going to be the case. But so George Lucas, Mark Hamill, Irving Kershner, I think, who directed Empire, were the only three people I believe that knew the truth, because he handed Mark Hamill a note that said, this is what it says, and he had to sign to NDA. Obviously, you can't tell anybody, all this stuff. We'll sue your pants off and all this other crap. But he handed him a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper in quotes it said, no, I am your father. And Mark Hamill's joke is that he looked around and said, is this true? Are you serious? And he was, come on, you're pulling my leg here. So the line that Mark reacts to is the truth, But the line that Prowse delivered was not the truth, because even Prowse wasn't told, supposedly at the time, what the truth was, because they were really trying to keep this thing under wraps. And Mark even said later on that Harrison Ford gave him crap about it, because he's like, hey, kid, you never told me about that. You know what I mean? So even he and Carrie Fisher didn't know, supposedly, which is awesome. But
Yeah, that would never happen today. Like,
oh, God, no.
Yeah, that would never happen today, where so many people would be kept out of the loop. I mean, you read certain stories about certain stuff with the Marvel movies, how some people don't know certain things, but I mean, just in this day and age where everybody's trying to get a scoop and everybody's trying to get, behind the scenes dirt, it just seems like everything comes out sooner than a lot of these companies want them to.
Yeah, what's the old line? You can't keep a secret in a room full of 5 people. How do you think you're going to keep a secret, something bigger? Yeah, it's people talk. You're right, man. There's too many scoops, especially when this stuff films on location, and everybody's got an iPhone or whatever, and they can just pull it out and say, hey, I got this footage. I think they're doing something over here. Next thing you know, it's all over Twitter and Facebook and stuff. Yeah, you can't keep anything secret, man. But yeah, it's still a shock if you really just watch those movies in order and just devote time to them. And I have, and try to forget everything else that came after. It's still a pretty unsettling thing when you reflect back and all the terrible things this guy did through the course of the first and second movie. Jedi brings us the Emperor, who we finally get to see the dude that Vader answers to. I mean, whoever Darth Vader answers to, this guy's got to be like, biggest heel ever, because damn, you know what I mean? So it's crazy. The Emperor's this ancient, decrepit, looks like he's ready to fall over, wither away, turn to dust, but he's evil, and Vader, pretty much everything he says, Vader does it. And it's that, master and apprentice kind of thing, that dynamic going on between them, which we got healthy doses of in the next trilogy, next 2 trilogies actually. But we were really just getting a taste of it in this. So when it comes to Return of the Jedi, as you mentioned before, his vulnerability, we get that great scene where Luke has turned himself in and he's allowed himself to be captured. He's not fighting them. He knows it's his destiny to face Vader. And he says, I still feel the good in you. I know there's good in you. And Vader turns his head and he says, it is too late for me, son. And in that moment, as a kid, I'm like, wow, he sounds human. I don't know if they gave away the ending when that happened, but looking back on it, maybe they kind of did. Because he wasn't like, listen here, kid. I mean, he didn't really give it to him. He just like, it's too late for me, son. Like he understood. It's not Luke's fault. Luke doesn't understand. I'm not going to hate this kid. He's my son. Very odd thing, man. How does that scene hit you? Did it fit? Did it seem weird? I mean, was it sort of a foreshadowing of what was to come?
Well, it didn't, because of course I didn't understand the context of it when I first saw it. But I think it fits the more you look at like the totality of the story, and you look at all of his character arc up to that point.
So it's just a natural progression, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you, of course, when you add the original, the prequel to it, it's even more fitting. But in the context of the entire trilogy, it's kind of like he's gotten to the point where he's done so much that it doesn't matter how much you try to appeal to him at this point. It's kind of like he's destroyed entire planets at this point. So
right.
There's I mean, in his mind, he's probably looking at it like, no, there's no redemption for me.
Yeah, because his words, God, that performance by Jones and just that one line just is almost bring you to tears, because it's like you said, he fully understands. It's too late. There's no coming back from me. You know who I am? I've been doing this a long time. There's no coming back. I've done stuff I can't even admit to you. That without saying all that stuff, that's kind of what he said, right? Like, you don't even want to know the stuff I've done. I can't even talk about it. It's that bad. That's just, yeah. If you look at it in that context, you're right. That's some pretty heavy stuff, man. he finds redemption, obviously, and I know we're kind of speeding through this, but I do want to get to the second set of movies here. He finds redemption in the end. You know, looking back on the fact that, yes, he did so much heinous stuff in those three films combined, and stuff that we didn't know about, because obviously he was the big bad long before we got to see episode 4. He'd been doing it for years. So stuff that we still don't know about. I mean, does he really get redemption at the end of Jedi by saving Luke and killing the Emperor? I mean, is that enough of a power play that you're like, he's not such a bad guy? Or does that really matter? I mean, in other words, did that need to happen the way it did? Is that enough the way it happened?
I think it does, because I think once you understand that the galaxy as a whole doesn't know that Anakin is Vader. Most people don't know that. Only people that are kind of in the know and in the circle, like whether you're a Jedi, but most people that would have known that are either dead, because nobody crosses up to that point. Nobody crossed Vader and lived.
Right.
And then on top of that, you wouldn't know, most of the people that knew like anything about the Jedi's before that were long gone. So by the time he got his redemption as Vader, you're never going to redeem the character in the name Vader. Vader is forever going to be like a scourge of the galaxy. But is it redemption for Anakin? I think it is, because Anakin was kind of unwilling in this entire thing. He was duped.
Because it's the dark side of the Force, and because the dark side of the Force is powerful because it plays on your emotions. It doesn't depend on logic. It doesn't rely on logic like the good side does. It relies on human emotion. And human emotions can be tricky, and they can be deceiving, and you can lie to yourself and not even know it. Yeah, it all makes sense. So I've opined on the original trilogy because it's still my favorite. You're stepping up to bat, my friend. You have, you know where I'm going, right? You have a much higher opinion of the second set of movies than I ever will. And this is, I don't know if this is a presentation of young and old, or veteran, or rising star. I don't know what you want to call this stuff we're about to do here, but sell me on number one, Hayden Christensen, if you can, if you even want to. I know it's not easy, man, all the time, right? But sell me on that. Sell me on young Anakin Skywalker. Why should I? Because I'm going to be honest with you, by the time Revenge of the Sith happened, I didn't believe any of it. I wasn't connected. I wasn't invested. No disrespect to Hayden, but his acting, the way he delivers his lines, I didn't feel anything. Dude, I'm a Star Wars lifer. I'm serious, man. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to be in the moment, say, yes, this is the Vader I wanted. Even by the time Revenge of the Sith came, I'm just like, let's just get to the end. I want to see how he puts the suit on. That's all I cared about. I didn't feel it. Sell me on this, man. Did it work for you? All 6 movies combined, does the second trilogy work for you in terms of Anakin's evolution to Vader?
I think the 6 movies work as a whole. Does the prequel work as a great trilogy? Not really. It works in pieces. But it's certainly, of course, not as good as the original trilogy. But I think what makes the prequel so interesting to me is, one, Obi-Wan's story arc throughout all 3 movies. I think that Obi-Wan is the star of the prequels. Just his character arc from the first movie all the way up is just, I think it's the tentpole of that trilogy. And Anakin's story, I think Anakin's story works, but I can agree that the acting isn't always the best. The dialogue isn't always the best.
Right, yeah.
There are a lot of problems with the original prequel, but I don't know if you saw where David Filoni was talking about what makes Phantom Menace work.
No, I've not seen that.
He's talking about it in one of those behind the scenes episodes of for Mandalorian.
Uh-huh.
And he based it around the duel of fates, right?
Uh-huh.
He's like the thing that makes uh Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon versus Maul so interesting, and it's because it's the most important battle in all of Star Wars. And just the way he breaks it down is just so fascinating to me. Because he was saying, of course, like the theme that's playing, the name of it is the Duel of Fates, but it's actually the Duel of Fates because Qui-Gon is battling Maul for the fate of Anakin. Because the notion is um, Qui-Gon is battling to be the father that Anakin needs, the father that he never had. And when he eventually dies, it kind of dooms Anakin to his fate because Obi-Wan takes on the mission to train him at that point, but he doesn't have his heart in it like Qui-Gon did. He doesn't believe in Anakin like Qui-Gon did. He's only doing it because it was his master's dying request. And I think that is just so interesting when you look at it all the way from that duel and Qui-Gon to death, and you kind of look at it in the sense that every ending for the prequel it's kind of like a mini empire, right? Because they lose in every movie in the trilogy, in the original trilogy. Like they don't win at the end of any of those movies. And I mean, you get this big celebration in Naboo, because they won the war, but they lost because Qui-Gon is dead, and you kind of got this first domino effect in Anakin becoming who he's going to become.
That's a great point. I guess I've never thought about it that way. I mean, I'm not going to say you sold me, but I can see. I can see. No, honestly, it does. It makes a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense. And you and I talked off air, which is what led us to the Vader episode here. And because it just sparked something in my head, we should make this an episode because we were talking about what would have happened had Qui-Gon survived, and he had trained Anakin. You would think that Anakin possibly would not have become Vader because Qui-Gon thought of him sort of as a son. That and like you said, his whole heart was into it. And Anakin would have felt that from day one. He didn't feel it with Ben, which is part of the reason why when things went south in Revenge of the Sith, Ben's yelling at him, "You were the chosen one," and all this other stuff. But Anakin could just as very well yell back, "You never loved me. You didn't believe that." Just do what? Imagine how much more powerful that scene would have been had Anakin yelled back, "You never believed that. You only did this
Yeah,
because you had to." Dude, that would have helped it for me. You know what I mean? I think, did they miss an opportunity by not having him say that?
sort of, because I mean, you do get the line where Obi-Wan admits that he failed him.
Right.
And I know that that is a stickler for some Star Wars fans. Some Star Wars fans are so invested in Anakin's story arc through the prequels that they're kind of like the Jedi's failed him because the Jedi's didn't see what was happening. And I think there's truth to that, and I think there's also truth to the fact that there's such thing as fate, and sometimes when things happen, sometimes they are supposed to happen for a reason.
Right.
And that goes all the way back to the original trilogy that Anakin was supposed to go down that path to get to a certain place so that his children could be what he could not be. And I just think that is once you realize that that's the focal point of all six movies, that's why I say it works as six movies. Now, again, does it work necessarily as single movies when you look at those prequels? Probably not. But I do think that there is a lot there to like. The entire relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin is so interesting because Obi-Wan is his master, but he sees him as a brother in some ways. He's never had like a father relationship with him like Qui-Gon would have. And it's in the same way that his relationship with the Jedi Council is so interesting. And it's like Mace Windu never sees him as a threat, but he's looking at him like, no, like he's too damaged. He has too much baggage. Like he shouldn't be in the position that he's in. He's always going to end up in a bad place. And Mace was right. And that was one of those things where I've had arguments with fans constantly where they're like, "No, Mace was too hard on him," and I don't think Mace is hard on him. I think Mace saw it for what it was. I think Mace knows that he's too emotionally damaged.
Yeah, yeah. Well put. I agree with that totally. Yeah, and of all the characters of the Jedi Council, he was the most straightforward, the most no BS. It's Sam Jackson, kids. What else? What'd you expect from Nick Fury? It's perfect, right? I mean, of course he would be the guy's like, I'm not falling for this. You're not fooling me. This kid's no. The answer is no, not happening. I mean, it does make sense because he, like you said, he was right. So if you really want to get technical about it, and maybe this is a question better left for the end of the show, but I'm gonna hit you with it anyway. Who really brought balance to the Force? Because they thought it was Vader, wasn't Vader. He screwed everything up. It was Luke, I guess, but maybe it wasn't Luke. Is it Rey? I don't know. Has the question been answered yet? The chosen one, the person that brings balance. Because every time you think the balance has been brought, something gets screwed up. So, you know what I mean? Has that narrative gone? Have we answered it? Is it Rey? Because I'm kind of fuzzy on that now.
I would probably argue that Luke brought balance to the Force because he kind of got rid of the remnants of the dark side. By the time Kylo goes to the dark side, this is like a completely different dark side because Kylo's he's kind of not a Sith. Like he doesn't behave like any Sith we've seen before that.
Very true. Young, impulsive, brash. You can't even say he's arrogant and cocky because he's so insecure and he's so self-conscious and he's so yeah. God, we could do a whole Kylo Ren episode, man. That'd be fun. Yeah, it's two very different characters. He's trying to live up to his grandfather, to the murderous, treacherous, Hitler-esque grandfather. Yeah, that's where I want to be, kids. Yeah, I can't wait to be that guy. So, and I mentioned this earlier, and we're skipping a lot of stuff here, but actually, don't let me skip it. I'll get there. You talked about a relationship between him and Ben, sort of the adventures that they're going on together, and you kind of feel like they're tag teaming this thing. They're working together. Obi-Wan's trying to keep him in place. He's not really listening because he's doing his own thing. You kind of see his Jedi robes begin to evolve, begin to transform. He starts wearing dark brown instead of light brown. There's a little black thrown in. It's almost like he's leaning there anyway. By the time you meet Chancellor Palpatine, you're like, oh, I know who that guy becomes. So start to come full circle. The whole concept of, I've foreseen the future, and he tells him, I have foreseen her death and all this stuff. I mean, and then he's like, what was it? He tells him that he's got a way. He's seen a way to bring them back to life, and he mentions another Sith Lord that has the capability of doing this. What was the guy's name? Darth what now? Was it Plagueis?
Yeah, Darth Plagueis.
Yeah, Plagueis, that's it. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. Again, I'll ask you, I'll put you on the spot. When all this starts getting into his head, and he's convinced that she's going to die, then he becomes convinced he can save her. Does that work for you? Is that enough?
Well, here's the thing. So Anakin, and this is why I always say that Mace was right, because Anakin he's a lot of things. He's very prideful from the first moment we see him. I mean, just think about the fact that Qui-Gon went to his house. He is a slave, and he gets to his house and he shows him, look what I built. I already can build a robot. I am already the best pod racer in the world. He's already extremely cocky coming in the door.
Right.
So he's already extremely cocky, but at the same time, he's got like extreme abandonment issues. And it's very clear from the first episode. Like, he didn't want to leave his mother. He was too attached to his mother. And Then of course, Smee dies, and like he just has this pattern of abandonment issues throughout the entire prequel. And so then when you get to he is attached himself to this person. No, no, I love Padme and I don't want to lose her. I've lost everything else in my life. I will not lose her. And so he's just too attached to her. He just gets too attached to people. And so of course, for somebody that wants to dupe him and trick him into doing what he wants, he would go, "Nope, I already see how to trick you because I've watched you get attached to Padme. You've gotten too attached to your friendship with me unknowingly. And now I'm going to trick you into being on my side by telling you I can save her, even though I don't think that he ever intended to tell him how to save Padme. But just the thought that I can keep dangling that over you for the rest of your life and you'll always be on my side."
Right.
Because the Jedi won't give you, because if you remember, when he talked to Yoda in the second movie, and he told him that he was having these visions that his mother was in trouble, he basically told him, you have to let go. You can't stay attached. And for Anakin, he didn't know how to do that. That's just something he could not come to grips with. And then at the same time, you've got this other guy that is like the ultimate Faustian promise. Like, hey, you don't have to let go of what you want. Why do you have to do that? I can give you everything you want and more. You don't have to let go of your attachments. Why do you have to do that? That's stupid.
And an Anakin, a young Anakin who had been listening to Ben all these months and years with a clear head would have seen through this. But he's ill-equipped to do that because, like you said, he's got those attachments that he can't or won't let go of, or both. And, when he goes to Tatooine and slaughters the Sand People, and we see he slaughters kids as well, right? And for the Sand People, they're kids and women, because he admitted. Who did he admit it to? Was it Padme he admitted it to?
Yes.
And he basically says, "I'd do it again." And I'm sorry, I don't mean to bag on him, but the way he delivers those lines when he tells her about it, on one hand, it's like, okay, he's cold and remorseless, but on the other hand, I'm like, wow, that was terrible. Oh man, am I too hard on Hayden? Be honest.
Well, here's the thing. I like Hayden a lot, and physically, I think he looks the part of what you would think Anakin should look like, because he's tall, he's handsome, he's all these things, and he's, of course, like, he's brave and all these other things that would make you think like, no, he's the best of us. You can see him as the chosen one.
Right.
Now, do I think his acting was always the best for the role? Probably not, but I also think some of the dialogue and the direction didn't help him.
Yeah, you make the best with what they give you, right? So, that was just a taste of what was going to come, right? Because Palpatine continues to get into his head, really twists him to the point that he goes to, is it the Jedi Council? Is that where he went? When they had the younglings, right?
Oh, yeah, when he goes back to the Enclave and yeah.
Wow. I mean...
yeah, but this is just how smart Palpatine was and just how thoroughly he duped Anakin. If you look at the small touch of all the way at the beginning of the movie, Anakin tells him, "I can't kill Dooku. That's not the Jedi way." And he goes, "Do it. Just go ahead and do it. Do it." And he kills him. And you parallel that with Mace at the end of their duel, knowing that he had to kill Palpatine. And he's kind of like winking at him like, "See, he's going to kill me." And he's like, and he already, now you have physical proof that the council are hypocrites.
Right. Yeah, he was playing him from the start. Yeah, putting everything into position, making him see what he wanted him to see, making him believe, without me, you're not going to make it. I'm the only one that can help you. Yeah, you're right. Totally. When he kills those kids, and thank goodness we didn't see it. They showed enough. When they all turned around and he lit up the lightsaber. I'm in the theater, and I don't forget, I can't remember who I was with, but I turned to who I was with and I said, "You're kidding me right now, right?" And you could feel it in the theater, man. You could feel sort of this gasp. There was an audible, what? And then it happens. So.
Master Skywalker, what do we do?
Right. Right. Too much, maybe? Was that too much?
I don't think it was too much because I think there was, because this is a PG movie. You're not gonna let him like do too much physical killing of innocents. This was the closest they were gonna get of him killing an innocent Jedi.
Right.
And I mean, we already get the idea that he was probably killing Jedis anyway. But I think just the visual of him murdering younglings is just like, even though we didn't see it, like you said, just the idea of it is just like, no, he's gone.
So, all right. So, second part of this, was that too much for this? Was in other words, the idea of it, was it too much? I guess what I'm asking is, did they need to do this? And if the answer is yes, was it to make you as the audience member hate him and turn on him? Or was it to just say, see how far he's gone now, he can never come back? I mean, is it all of the above?
Well, because when you look, I mean, even when you look at the first youngling that comes to him, he kind of looks like Anakin, right? He kind of looks like Anakin in the first movie.
Yep.
And I think it's just the visual of him killing this image of what we knew him to be at the beginning of the trilogy. And I think that's part of why it works.
And it makes me think of Kylo's line to Rey where he goes, kill it if you have to, right? Talking about the past and all this other stuff. It actually makes sense the way you put it.
Well, yeah, and that's the Sith way. It's like you have to destroy it. Like that stuff is not going to help you. Like it doesn't matter what they've taught you here. Doesn't matter what the Jedi have told you. You have to destroy it. That was your past. Get rid of it.
Yeah, and it. I don't know. I don't want to make it one of those things where I'm so completely against something that I won't give it a chance. But I guess it's just been in my head for so many years now that the second set of movies didn't work for me. I didn't feel the connection. To be fair, I've never gone back and watched them all together at the same time, like one after another. Maybe I should. Just to get the sense of connection and see if I'm feeling it then. But I don't know, man. When that part came, I'm just thinking that's too much. I don't know. Like, you really want me to hate this kid? I get it, but man, did we need to even get the idea that he would go this far? I mean, at that point, you're like, there's no coming back ever.
Well, I mean, we already know he's done it, though. I mean,
true.
Without seeing him kill younglings, he's killed millions of kids. We just haven't seen it on screen because he's destroyed planets.
It's true.
He's done countless atrocities like that. So I mean, maybe you could say just the visual of it is just so far. But I mean, I just think that entire scene was done really well. Once Palpatine is just like, yep, well, let's just go ahead and flip over our cards. We won. And
right.
It's like, it's so well done because the Jedi were just completely caught with their pants down. I mean, he completely infiltrated the entire government. He tricked them into taking part in the war. He just completely duped them. I mean, and then on top of that, he's looking at it like, yep, and I have the chosen one. I won.
Yeah, and then we get the big fight between him and Ben, and I have the high ground now and all that stuff. And if you watch Mythbusters, you know that's maybe it doesn't work. So
there's so many. When you say quotables, there are so many quotables from their exchange that I quote constantly. Like when he comes out of the ship, and oh no, I have to cut all the way to the beginning when when Padme comes down and he's like, I don't want to talk about Obi-Wan anymore. It's like, it's just so overly dramatic.
Oh,
the lines in that part are just they're so bad that they are funny.
Right.
Or love can't save you, Padme. Only my new powers can do that.
Right, yeah. Oh. There's enough cheese in that movie to make a pizza, man. I'm telling you, it's awful. I mean, just oh
man, like, but it's so funny and it's so bad and campy to the point that it's become iconic for me. It's almost like when I watch those old the old Batman, like the '60s Batman. It's so campy and weird that it's like I ended up loving it because it's like this cult thing for me. Um, but I kind of see Revenge of the Sith as the same way. Revenge of the Sith is my favorite of those movies. Um, and it's just because it's so hammy. Like even Palpatine's performance, he's just so hammy in it. It's just it just works. I don't know why it works. It probably shouldn't, but it does. And like their whole exchange when he comes down and Obi-Wan tells him, only a Sith would deal in absolutes. I'll do what I must.
Yeah, I know you love that line too. That's good stuff.
But that's just it. Like that sums up who Obi-Wan is to me, and that's to me that line and just everything he does from then on is just like I said. It just sums him up, and it's just a perfect end to his story arc for that trilogy.
Right. Well, of course, we see Hayden all burned up. He's all burned up. He's missing. Did Vader cut off? No, Vader. Did Ben cut off his legs and his arms, or was it just his legs?
Well, his arm was already cut off.
That's
Remember,
right.
because he lost his arm to Duke in the Dooku fight.
That's right. So and he's melting and stuff, and it's all really hot. He's all burned up. And,
I hate you.
Yeah. Yeah, he's screaming, I hate you. Had tears in his eyes. That's pretty powerful. I did see it was fan made where somebody had pieced together, him as a kid and Vader as a young, or Ben as a young man and all this stuff. And then piecing together, the very final scene between the two. It's actually pretty good. It was better than what I saw in the movie, to be honest. I'm like, you could have just told the story in that one montage.
Yeah, and it is emotional when he does see him there like that, and he's like, "I love you, Anakin. Like you're like a brother to me. I didn't want to do this. You did this to yourself."
And he's right. Do you think he's right? There's the question. Did Anakin do this to himself? Okay, so we haven't looked at the good side of the Force here much, man. We've been all about the dark side, which is fine. Did Ben have a chance to save this guy, or did he really do all he could?
I think once Qui-Gon died, I think he was always going to go his own way. Yeah. He being Anakin. I think Anakin was always going to go his way the second Qui-Gon was out of the picture. And I think that's because Qui-Gon is a representation of what is like the true essence of like a Force wielder at the time, because he didn't believe in all the bureaucracy that the council was high on at the time. He didn't believe in following their rules. He believed in listening to the will of the Force. And that's what led him to Anakin. That's what led him to seeing him as the chosen one and wanting to train him. And none of the other Jedi were in that same place. None of them would have made the same decisions that Qui-Gon would have made. And so it's kind of like, yeah, once Qui-Gon's gone, Anakin was doomed. And some of it is Anakin's own decisions, but I think some of it was the Jedi's arrogance. The Jedi's just, they were so blinded by they were right in this, or they were just, that they couldn't see that they were being used. And especially with Anakin, when once Palpatine appointed him to the council and they played right into his hands, and they didn't allow him the title of master, and they made him feel unwanted. That was it. That was the last push to push him in their direction.
Mm-hmm. So he really didn't have a chance, honestly.
I don't think he had a chance because he was just too emotionally damaged. I mean, he was a kid that came from slavery. We don't know much about his father. I mean, there are hints that, there was immaculate consumption, which, I mean, not consumption, but conception. And I want to stare far away from that, because I know some people believe that's canon. I think that's hokey. But, like, we don't know much about his father. And his relationship with his mother is so emotional for him, because he never really gets a chance to grieve, and he still feels in some ways, I would assume that the Jedis are to blame, because he told them. He told them that he was having these visions and he wanted to go away and see what was happening, and he didn't. He didn't follow his first instinct, and that's what I mean. That's one of those things. Do you think if he told Qui-Gon that he had that same vision, that he would have told him to be mindful of his attachments? I think Qui-Gon would have went with him. He would have gone and he would have tried to save Shmi.
Yeah, I could see that totally. Qui-Gon would have took a bullet for that guy.
And I mean, it isn't just because he believed in Anakin. I think it's because he believed in the will of the Force. He believed in following your instincts. And I think once Anakin told him that he was having these visions, he would say, we need to investigate this. And so I think that there are parts of that Anakin is justified in being angry about. I think his anger at the Jedi is like, I think he still holds on to the fact that his mother died and nobody helped her. I mean, even the fact that she was still enslaved and they just left her there.
So, speculation time. And sometimes we will write another movie that doesn't exist because we're geeks. That's what we do. Guilty. Let's say that they had never found Anakin. Okay. Is Anakin Darth Vader, or would there have been a Darth Vader, period, because the Emperor would have seen to it? Do you know what I mean? Like if Anakin as a child had never crossed paths with Qui-Gon or Ben Kenobi, if it never happened, would there have been a Darth Vader, or was he the only one that, you know what I mean? Like, I guess maybe part of the path is the past, right? So he had to have been that screwed up. He had to have had all that baggage. So was he the only one that could have done it? Do you know what I mean? Considering everything that happened to him.
That's an interesting question because we see Palpatine has had several apprentices up to that point. Like he had Maul, and then he had Dooku. And that's what makes Qui-Gon not being there so interesting, because the other question is, does Dooku give up on the Jedi way if Qui-Gon's still there? And does he, move to the dark side? It's so interesting, like, to think how different it would have been if Qui-Gon did not die. And I'm not sure on the answer to that, because on one hand, I almost feel like Palpatine orchestrated it a way to get Qui-Gon where he was to meet Anakin. But I'm not sure if he orchestrated it that far back. I don't know. That's it, whether you think Palpatine had his eye on him that long. But he's present. He's present in Phantom Menace. He makes an appearance in the movie, so you never know.
Very true. Yeah, I think it would have been a much different path, like you said, had he lived. And to be fair, I never really thought about how important his death was to this entire series. And I don't know that Lucas, to be honest, I think Lucas just wanted to make those 3 movies. Did he really realize just how important that guy's murder was to the course of everything that came after? And to be fair, like I said, I never thought about it till you actually mentioned it. But the wheels have been turning in my head for a week now about, man, that's so true. Had he lived, this would have been a much different story. I mean, goodness knows where we would have ended up in the end.
Yeah, and I mean, but there are several other things that happen like that. I mean, yeah, again, if maybe if Obi-Wan had realized just how mentally unstable Anakin had gotten by the second movie and tried to do something about it, maybe there were a few people that fell asleep at the wheel here. So it's not totally that Qui-Gon wasn't there, but that was, of course, the biggest catalyst.
Takes a village, right?
Yeah.
So everybody kind of let this guy down. I've actually been watching Rogue One. It's since we started recording this, because I wanted to get a taste of Vader. And I got to be honest with you, just like every movie that's happened after Jedi, every single movie after Jedi has gotten its fair share of complaints and critiques, and I get a lot of it. Some of it I think silly, some of it I think is deserved, if I'm being honest. I'm thoroughly entertained by Rogue One. I think it connects perfectly to Episode 4, and the fact that we get Vader, the real Vader, like, just to see him on the big screen like that. Hadn't seen him since Jedi, okay? Years earlier.
Yeah.
Dude, what a great thing when he walks straight up to Krennic, like, I mean, straight up into his face. Like, you don't even get a pause at all. Man, it's like, here he is. Such good stuff, man. They did it right, you know?
Yeah, I really love Rogue One. I think it's one of the best of the newer Star Wars movies. Um, and I mean, just the visual of him stepping into that hallway when they're trying to escape with the plans, and you just see the lightsaber ignite, and he just destroys all of these
Oh,
troopers.
man.
I mean, you get the first taste. I mean, we see it before, but this is the first taste we've seen him just annihilate a bunch of like non-force wielders on screen, and this is the first taste of us seeing just how terrifying he is.
And how fully in control and how confident. And yeah, he knows nothing can touch him. Shoot at him all day. It doesn't make a difference. I mean, he is. Yeah, he's honestly, he's almost too cool and too bad in Rogue One. Because if you watch Rogue One and then watch Episode 4 after it, then he kind of moves like an old man, and then it's kind of, we're not sure what he is again. But to see him in Rogue One, you're like, oh man, I hope he does this in the next movie. You're like, crap, Episode 4 is the next movie. He doesn't quite do that. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I do think
yeah,
they pay total respect to the character in Rogue One for sure.
yeah. And I mean, a way you can look at that is the the fight with Obi-Wan in 4. Man, the fight with Obi-Wan in 4 is interesting after you watch it. After you watch their fight in 3, because just the way that Vader fights him is totally different. He uses the lightsaber to kind of keep him at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watched it one day, and I really realized, like, oh, he has been reliving that fight for so long that he's like, no, I'm not letting you get away with the same thing. And of course, we know that Obi-Wan let him beat him at the end of the fight, but just the way he fights him for most of that fight, it's just like, nope, I'm gonna keep you grounded. I'm gonna keep you here. I'm gonna keep you in front of me. I'm not gonna let you get off any of this stuff from our original fight because I've been reliving that for years.
No higher ground for you, old man. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm gonna keep extending my lightsaber at you and forcing you at a distance and letting you and keeping you in my fight.
And you know, in some weird way, he kind of, and this is me just putting this in because I'm sure this was not a thought at the time, but he never tries a force choke. He never does a force push during that fight. Vader doesn't, right? So it's almost like a certain level of respect that he's fighting Ben as well. Or is that me putting too much into it?
Yeah, and I mean that's why I'm like I wonder, and of course we're gonna get some answers because the new news that came out that Vader's gonna be in the Obi-Wan series.
Yes.
Like sometimes I wonder, like, was that their first fight again after their fight in 3?
Ooh.
And we don't really get like a definitive answer to that. I don't think. I don't think. I don't. At least I don't think we did in New Hope, unless I missed it.
That's an interesting rabbit hole to go down, man. Because I've never followed the Clone Wars. I don't know if you followed every episode. I mean, of course, that the timeline's wrong. See, I get my timelines wrong with all these movies, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think Star Wars Rebels is the one that's after.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there you
yeah,
go.
Rebels. So maybe something's mentioned at one point that's not officially canon, but dude, that's a great rabbit hole to go down. And not for nothing, a lot of years have passed since these two guys have touched sabers. So, like you said, it's an interesting take, really, because the fight means more to Vader than it does to Ben because Ben's older. He's done a lot since then. Maybe he's not done anything. He's been secluded on Tatooine, but Vader's killed
Yeah,
a whole lot of people in the years up to this fight.
yeah. Well, there's two things going into that fight that you also have to take from the prequel. One, he's coming into that fight after years of also thinking about just the time you spent with Anakin and knowing that, yeah, I might have failed him as his master. And it's like you didn't come into that fight and fight him as ferocious as you might have before, because you're looking at it like, no, I really did let you down. I really didn't do everything I probably could have.
Mm-hmm.
And then also he's like, his son is the future and I have to do this for him. And, if I die, it doesn't matter because I've already done my part.
Yeah, it's a good take, man. I like that. It's so interesting to go back and I don't know about you. I've never sat down and watched all 6 movies in the course of a couple days. Have you done that? Have you done a marathon of these movies?
I haven't. I've done a few times where I watched the entire original trilogy because they'll have all of them on TNT like around Christmas and all these other holidays,
Right,
and you
right.
just end up watching all of them. So I've done that, but I've never watched all 6 movies back to back.
I've done the Marvel marathon, not in the order they were released, but in the order they were supposed to. The story was told, and I did that over the course of a week and got every movie out in a week. But I've never commit. I just need to commit, dude. I'm just going to commit. I'm going to make Rogue One the first one. I'm going to watch them in order and see how I feel at the very end.
So are you gonna watch all 6, or are you gonna get into the next 3 movies as well?
That's a lot, dude. That's a lot. Of course, with the Marvel marathon, you're watching more than how many movies was it? I've lost count.
Yeah, if you're watching the entire thing, you're
Yeah,
watching almost 10 years worth of movies.
very true. And I did that. I had a vacation week and had nowhere to go and nothing to do. So I started, I can't remember what night it was, on a Wednesday or Thursday, and didn't get done until that Tuesday or Wednesday. It took that long for me, which is impressive. It didn't take that long, but maybe I'll do that, man. At the end of the day, I love Vader. I love the character. There's still an asterisk by this guy for me because, in my opinion, I can't help it, man. I mean, looking back on it now, I think there's so many opportunities they could have took. I'll be honest with you. I think you write a better movie than they did. By your analysis of the second trilogy and where you think they were going and how things fit together, to hear you tell it makes a better book, better movie than the way I felt when I watched it. So, having talked to you about this more than once, maybe now's the time for me to go back and watch these movies and try to get a better sense of maybe what they intended on, or maybe what I thought. I don't know.
Yeah,
But maybe I need to give another shot, you know?
yeah. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm not the biggest fan of the prequels, but see, I think it's also like you said, it's a age difference because I remember when Star Wars came back to movies, and I remember just how big of a deal it was and how big of a deal people made out of Anakin's story. Because there's like an entire generation that connects with Anakin, which is crazy. There's an entire generation that connects with Anakin more than they connect with Vader.
Crazy.
Um, yeah, it is. But there are a lot of people that are big fans of Anakin, and I mean, you see that because like I said, I'm a big fan of Obi-Wan. I'm a big fan of Mace, and there are a lot of Anakin fans that hate those characters, and I didn't understand that until I saw how people talk about it online. And that's when I really realized, like, no, the prequels connect with people in a way that I didn't quite understand.
Right. Well, I mean, the great thing about the character is he is so iconic. That's how we started the show off, man. He's iconic. It's just from a visual standpoint, you could keep this character going for another 30 years if you wanted to. Switch off the guys in the suit, and it would have been great. All due respect to James Earl Jones because he's earned every second of it. But I mean, you can get a voice actor to do a very, very close impression,
Yeah.
and probably make it work. And again, that's all due respect.
So
Um,
So, how do you feel now that I'm thinking about it? Because Anakin's voice is one of the voices Rey hears in um, the last movie. So,
yes,
how did you feel about his brief cameo in that?
I got it. I didn't love it, but I got it. It honestly, I got feelings on that movie. The Emperor never should have come back, and if he has,
Yeah.
she should never have been his daughter. Spoiler alert, kids. That was too much for me. I didn't believe any of that. or his granddaughter, right?
Yeah.
I didn't believe any of that. I didn't.
Yeah, because of course the rumor was that there was supposed to be more than the voices. We were supposed to see everyone's actual Force ghost.
Right. That would have been too much.
And I mean, I have issues with that movie as well. I did get a little bit of a feeling in the pit of my stomach when Anakin spoke, and I was like, "Oh, it's Anakin." It's like, but I think it's just because, again, we're conditioned to know Anakin as a character, because it's almost like we could have an entire podcast on Anakin as a character outside of Vader, because
Oh, yeah.
Anakin's story is so interesting in its own way.
It would have been great to hear James Earl Jones as Vader say, "Use the Force, Ray." That would have been awesome. Talk about taking you out of the moment. In the theater, you'd be like, "Wait, what did he just say? Use the Force? That's great." And then, like, she braced character goes, "Wait a minute, Vader just told me to use the Force. This is awesome." Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the new films, and maybe one day you and I can hit the new trilogy. That'd be fine with me. The new films kind of feels like, hey, we're a bunch of fans. We grew up watching this. Here's what I think would have happened next.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is not necessarily bad. But at the same time, it's like, oh, dude, we should totally get voices in this. Oh, dude, let's totally get Anakin. Oh, dude, let's do it. That's kind of what all that felt like to me, man. Like a bunch of dudes.
It was a little fan servicey.
Yes.
And I mean, the fan service worked really great in Force Awakens because we were reintroducing the world to Star Wars.
Right.
But I think once you come in and you get your reintroduction off, you don't need to keep doing it. At some point, you have to be your own thing. And that's why I enjoyed Last Jedi, because it tried to be something different. And yeah, it felt like once they got to the third movie, it was like, nope, we're going right back to fan service. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and they're duplicating scenes from the original trilogy, and a lot of stuff happening, and trying to make you get all the feels at the end. And I don't know. Like I said, that's another podcast, but
Yeah.
I can't say they've tried to replace Vader. I don't think they're doing that with Kylo. I don't think that was the goal. It was just to give this generation their Vader, their villain. I honestly think Adam Driver is way underrated as Kylo Ren.
Yeah, I really like Kylo Ren.
I do too, and he suffers from some crap dialogue as well.
Yes, yes.
But that scene where he's explaining to her who she really is, and he says, "Your parents were nobody. They were nothing. You're nobody. You're nothing." And then he stops and he says, "But not to me." Dude, I got chills right now. That's his best moment in those movies.
I thought he was fantastic in the second movie.
Yes.
I thought all of the scenes they had together where they kept having those whatever those visions they would have together, those were great. And I thought his entire arc throughout the entire movie worked really well. And then they kind of just went and redeemed it for some reason. I don't know why they had to do that.
Honestly, I was okay with the redemption. I did feel it was forced. No pun intended.
Yeah, the redemption is fine, but I just thought the way that they went about it just didn't work for me.
So having Han as a Leia projected Han's image to him.
Yeah, that was a lot. I didn't think you needed to do all of that.
It put tears in my eyes. I've got a lot of dad stuff there for me personally, and it really did something for me. I can't say it made it work, but I kind of felt like I can totally see why this happened, because, killing Han Solo, dude, I do not want to be the guy that killed Han Solo. That's not going to be me. And he's the guy that did it. So like, yeah, that's a killer right there. That's a huge moment for this franchise. Forget the movie, franchise as a whole.
Yeah.
And, yeah, just the idea that he could get redemption for that. I mean, Kylo Ren's another episode, honestly. A lot of material there on him. So we didn't really touch much on the Rebels or anything. And there's Vader's had appearances in video games. What's the video game where you had? It's fun. It's so much fun to play. Where Vader has an apprentice.
Oh, you're talking about
I'm blanking on the
oh,
name.
there were two of them.
Yes, there
Uh,
was.
the main character's name is Star Destroyer, right?
Star Killer.
Star Killer. There you go. And
Yeah.
what is the name of it?
I can't remember the name. Isn't that terrible?
Yeah, there's so many Star Wars games. I keep thinking Jedi Academy because those were like the Star Wars games I liked. And Vader's in one of those. Ah, I don't remember. Okay. He's fun to play in Battlefield too, where you have to like do those like 3v3 kind of missions, and you can play as Vader or like Palpatine.
Right.
But yeah, Vader is always going to be one of those like extremely interesting characters, and I just think Anakin adds just an even more to this character. He adds so many more layers to him. Uh, Man, I mean, even when you think of stuff like just the fact that he, like I said, that the question is still, is he the chosen one or is his son the chosen one? Like, is the legacy of Skywalker's like meant to balance the Force? I don't know. It's an open-ended question.
They haven't answered it for me, man. The Force Unleashed.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. There's a whole other story to that too, man. The guy they based The Apprentice off of, his likeness and his voice, was the guy that played Doomsday in the Smallville show. The guy that became Doomsday, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think about it sometimes. Like, we keep tending to get the same narrative in these movies. Is that, well, this is the guy. We found him, kids. It's all good. We found him. And then by the end of the movie, you're like, nope, wrong guy. So like, I don't know. In my opinion, I'm still of the firm belief that bringing the Emperor back, it's a whole other podcast, bringing the Emperor back the way they did, in my opinion, almost negated what Vader did to save Luke. It sort of said, nah, that we're taking that back. We're going to take that back. It didn't mean nothing now. Because guess what? He lived. Like, what? I mean, I know how they tried to explain it, but still, he's there. It's the Emperor. He's not dead. He's still here. So,
right, 'cause it's a clone, right?
It is a clone, yeah, but bleh, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't really care for the Emperor's involvement. I have so many like what ifs with the original trilogy and the prequels. I mean, even when you look at Clone Wars, like I just started binge watching Clone Wars recently,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just such a different take on Anakin. And he's such a different character in that show than he is in the movies.
Right.
Um, I don't know, man. It's I've had this weird fan cast that I've been thinking for years, and my thought has always been because James Earl Jones is black. Like, what if Anakin was black? I've told people this theory for a long time, and I was like, if Anakin is black, it changes the entire dynamic of his story. And it's not because it introduces race, because of course, this is space. Like, race is not a thing.
Not a thing, right?
But as a viewer, the optic of it is different. And there's a way to kind of allude to race issues in an interesting way through that. And I don't think some fans are ready for that. They wouldn't have accepted it, as we see with some of the new Star Wars.
Yeah.
But I do think it's an interesting story, because I think it's lost on some people the fact that Anakin was a slave, and he was freed because he was exceptional. He wasn't freed because it was the right thing to do. Because otherwise, then you'd free his mother as well. You only freed Anakin because he was exceptional.
You're writing another movie. That's wow. That's mind-blowing, because then it becomes, not only is he a slave and so is his mother, but the white guy comes in to save him.
Yeah, I mean, there's
you know what I mean?
Like,
so yeah,
that's why I'm like, it's so interesting, because look, you freed him because he was exceptional and you brought him in, but you would only allow him to go so far.
Right.
You wouldn't allow him to be seen as a master. He still was in
Right.
some way subjugated. And that's why you can have at the end of this, the Anakin didn't see being a Jedi as his way to his goal from the original movie. Because remember, his original goal was that he didn't want anyone to ever feel enslaved again.
Right.
He didn't want anybody to be in his situation again.
That's a crazy great take. You should have hit me with that before the end of the show, man. We could have done a whole episode on that. That's great stuff. I love
Yeah, I
that.
mean, I feel like I tweeted that, and of course some people were like, "Oh, well, are you saying that that makes the Jedi's racist?" And I'm like, "No, of course it doesn't." But I'm saying to viewers that know what race is, it
Right.
adds another layer to his story. I mean, even if you look at just Mace's relationship with Anakin and how that changes, there's so much that changes if you do it that way. And I mean, of course, then people will go, "Oh, so are you saying that Luke is mixed?" It's like, again, this adds so much more
Right.
interesting story to Padme and his relationship.
Oh, wow, dude, crazy. I'm loving every second of that. Um, yeah, wow. And just like any great art, whether it's a film or a book or an album or a song, great art doesn't tell you what it is. It lets you decide what it is.
Right.
So your take is right that no, that's not necessarily what they'd be saying. Maybe they wouldn't even be thinking about race, but they're going to let you decide how you feel about it. How do you take it? Because, dude, over the years, we've heard from creators of different things, whether it was a musician or a director or an actor, they'll hear a different take and they'll go, honestly, I never thought about that. We didn't think about it when we were filming it. We didn't think about it when it was released. I've never thought about it. But it's the fans who embrace it and go, you know what it could be, what I think it is. That's another reason why the Star Wars fan base is awesome and wholly toxic at the same time. Because
Yes, exactly.
they can't differentiate the two. They can't just be, it's just a movie, relax. No, it's more than that.
Yeah, and of course I'm not sitting here like, "Oh man, they screwed it up
No, I
because
get
he should have been black." And I'm not sitting here with my fan cast like, "It's totally wrong now. It's ruined."
it.
Um, but because I do think that there is something to the visual of Hayden being in some way soft and unharsh and assuming like Vader becomes, and his voice changes to symbolize his change to
Oh,
the dark side.
yeah. Right.
And I do think there's a lot to that works. And I mean, even like the scene where the helmet comes down on him for the first time, and you hear his voice for one final time before it locks on. All of that stuff works.
Yeah, it does. Like I said, it's a whole different movie, man. Um, like I said before, great character. The fact that you can take him in different directions and still make it work shows you how great of a character it is. You could probably change the character's gender and make it work as well. That would be another dynamic as well, a whole different kind of story.
Yes.
But you could probably make that work too. And honestly, it all goes back to the fact that whether Lucas knew all of this or not in the original trilogy, I'm guessing he didn't. He just needed a bad guy with a suit of armor. That's what he gave us. But, over the years, you can add layers and textures and different viewpoints. And we get the Darth Vader today and get the Darth Vader that could have been. It's great stuff. So, to wrap this up, give me your last word on Lord Vader. What do you got?
Probably the most iconic villain in all of cinema. Like you have a hard time coming up with anybody that has left as big of an impression on the history of movies since.
I agree with that. And I have looked up several lists in the past to see where different people have him ranked. AFI's 100 Years of Heroes and Villains has Darth Vader at the number 3 mark behind Norman Bates and number 1, Hannibal Lecter. And it should be noted that number 4 is the Wicked Witch of the West. Yeah. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth, I guess. But, yeah, for me, he is If you just base it on the original trilogy alone, maybe he's not. But if you base it on everything combined, yeah, seeing the stuff, all the heinous stuff that he's guilty of. Yes, he found redemption at the end. It was a long time coming, right? But I would definitely say he's got to be the number one. It's hard for me to put anybody else above him. If for no other reason, he's just that one guy you're never going to forget. I don't know that I can say that everybody I know has seen Silence of the Lambs, but there's very few people I know who don't know who Darth Vader is. Put Anthony Hopkins' picture up with that mask on. Maybe people know him, maybe they don't. Everyone knows who freaking Darth Vader is, and that is, to me, a character that stands the test of time, will never be forgotten, and he'll always be with us in one form or another. And that is Darth Vader. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.